Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Michigan Works Association 2021 Annual Conference. I'm hoping everyone can hear me okay. My name is Sally Richard. I'm the Quality Assurance Manager with the Upper Peninsula Michigan Works. On behalf of the staff at the association and all of our sponsors, we thank you for being part of the conference and this session titled Trauma-Informed Training and Resilience Building at Detroit at Work. Be sure after this to visit the exhibitor booth during the designated exhibit hall times. So before we begin today's session, a few housekeeping items. Please make sure you are muted as it was put in the chat a couple of times. You do not have to request audio and video. As long as you can hear the presentation okay, you're doing great. There is Q&A throughout, so please put your questions in the chat. And there is also the Q&A feature to use as well. We are eager to hear all of your feedback about the entire conference as well as this session. So please make sure at the end to take the short survey. I've put a link in so far, and I'll make sure to put another link at the end of the session. The presentation will be available after the conference on the association's website. So if you have any questions on how to access that, please put that in the chat and I'll make sure to get an answer to you. So now to introduce our presenters, we have Vicki Choits, Director, Federal, State, and Local Systems Change with CSW, Caitlin McGovern, Manager, Human-Centered Service Delivery with Detroit at Work, and Nihal Osman, Career Center Manager with Detroit at Work. So thank you, and go ahead and take it away.
Great, Sally. Thanks so much. We appreciate it. Good Monday morning to everybody. We're so glad you're here. And we have a exciting session for you all. I'm going to start off giving you just a little bit of a background on trauma and resilience. What we mean by that, we're going to have a little bit of interaction to get your sense of trauma and what you use as resilience strategies. And then Caitlin's going to talk about the Detroit at Work project. In which CSW is working with Detroit at Work to do trauma-informed training and resilience building. And then Nihal, who runs one of the career centers in the Detroit at Work network, is going to be sharing with you what the experience is like from a career center perspective and what her folks are learning so far. So we have a jam-packed session. I am going to dive in. If you've got any questions, put it in the Q&A and we'll have designated spots in the presentation to address those, and feel free to keep chatting with your colleagues. So what is trauma and resilience? We're going to start by engaging you all. How do you define trauma? If you could just please type in the chat real quick, a definition of trauma, an example of trauma, particularly any sort of trauma that you have experienced yourself or that you've seen in your staff or your clients over the last 18 months of the collective trauma we've experienced. Just go ahead and type some things in chat so we can get a sense of what you all understand this to be. Are you out there? There we go. Crisis situation, yes. Anything causing a fearful reaction. That speaks to the experience of trauma, which we'll get to in the definition. Loss of a job, unemployment, definitely high sources of trauma that we've seen over the last several months and in people's lives. A major impact or setback, definitely. A life experience that has negative impacts with lingering effects. That's right. Trauma has a long tail, which we'll talk about. Yeah, a situation that affects emotional and physical well-being. Kim, you are like on it. I think that you read the definition ahead of time. Abuse of any kind. Yep. Lack of control. It can be very traumatic for people, especially if you've had a lot of traumas and then you have lack of control that just adds on to it. Great. Yep, unforgettable for sure. Stressful or fearful event causing extended anxiety. Yep. Excellent. You guys know quite a bit about this then. So this will be a great discussion. Caitlin, do you want to go ahead and advance the slides? Okay, thanks, folks. So just wanted to give you the official SAMHSA, Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration definition of trauma, so that way you have that. An event, series, or events, or set of circumstances that is experienced by as an individual. So you could have the same exact event, but it's experienced by different individuals differently. So that's an important thing to keep in mind when we're thinking and talking about trauma. By an individual as physical or emotionally harmful. So Kim, you got that one right. Or life-threatening. And that has lasting effects, that tail that we talked about, on an individual's functioning and mental, physical, social, emotional, and spiritual well-being. So trauma just doesn't affect our emotions, but it affects a wide variety of aspects of our lives. And that's something to keep in mind as well. Next slide. So I want to talk about the difference between stress and trauma. And there's different levels of stress. So yeah, Caitlin, just kind of keep going through. We'll make this dance work. Yeah, go all the way to the bottom. So stress can go from positive stress, which can be good if you have a deadline for a paper or a proposal that you need to get in. That can be a little stressful, but that's what helps you focus, and that's what really helps you get the energy that you need to be able to meet that deadline. But then stress can build. It can be tolerable. So for instance, right now, I am down 2 staff people. That's pretty stressful for me, but it's tolerable because I know that we're going to make an offer to one today and hopefully to another one in a few days. So we're going to be able to recover from this quickly, and I won't have that stress once I get staffed up. But if that kept going, if we weren't able to hire staff, it could lead to toxic stress, in which it's just strong, frequent, ongoing adversity that creates this prolonged stress response. So my body would always be creating this cortisol. I would always feel like I'm doing too much work. And sometimes that toxic stress can spill over into traumatic stress, which is actually a mental health diagnosis characterized by a reaction to experiencing extreme stress that causes interference with your basic daily life and activities. Traumatic stress is actually a type of trauma. So let's pull up the types of trauma now. And I'm not going to go through every single one of these. I'll just give you a warning. My part of the presentation is just like a real quick overview, and you'll want to go back and look at the slides afterwards, which is why I was glad that Sally mentioned that the slides will be available on the association's websites. But just understand that there's different types of trauma, and it really kind of varies by the quantity of the trauma, whether it's an individual personal trauma, or community trauma, or collective trauma, such as the pandemic that we've all experienced, which I think is why so many people are interested in learning more about trauma these days. So you can come back and look at this slide in more detail after the presentation. Next slide. So one very common type of trauma is called adverse childhood experiences. This is the one that we're most familiar with. It's been the most studied. And it's basically highly stressful experiences that can happen to any one of us before we turn 18. And you'll see when Caitlin advances that there were 10 original adverse childhood experiences that were studied in the 1990s: abuse, neglect, and household challenges. So physical, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, household challenges such as divorce, incarceration of a family member, etc. Keep going, Caitlin. These are all very prevalent. So the original ACEs study that was done in the 1990s found that 61% of adults had at least one adverse childhood experiences, so at least one of those things in the 10. 16% had 4 or more types of ACEs. Now, this original study was done on a bunch of white middle-class folks, but as you'll see in the next section of this slide, Philadelphia, about 5 or 7 years ago, did an expanded ACEs study that looked at a more diverse group of folks in terms of race and ethnicity, and that also included additional types of trauma, including community trauma, like living in a violent neighborhood. And when they expanded that, they found that 70% of adults had experienced one adverse childhood experience, and 40% had experienced 4 or more. So if you've experienced these, you're not alone. If you know that your clients or your staff have experienced these, they're not alone. These are actually quite prevalent. Next slide. So this slide's a little bit overwhelming, but I just wanted to show in the upper right-hand corner that adverse childhood experiences and trauma are linked, as I said, to more than just your emotional responses. It's linked to physical outcomes as well. So people who have 4 or more ACEs are at higher risk of having lung disease due to smoking. They're at higher risk of suicide attempts, of depression, of drug abuse, and early sexual activity. They're also at higher risk of disease. And the reason is because when our brains are experiencing trauma or experiencing toxic stress, a lot of cortisol and stress hormones are flowing throughout our body, getting ready for this fight, flight, freeze, or submit reaction. And that's actually wearing down your organs. It's wearing down your immune system. It's wearing down your physical aspects of your body. So that's another very important reason why it's critical for us to understand trauma and toxic stress better. Next slide. And it also affects employment and folks' ability to succeed in employment. Studies, again, have shown on ACEs, but this would apply to all sort of toxic stress and traumas, that individuals with 2 ACEs or more are 1.5 times more likely to have job problems. They're more likely to have financial problems, more likely to be absent from work, and that just increases with the number of ACEs. Want to let you guys know now, if you are starting to feel some physical symptoms, maybe your face is flushing a little bit, maybe your heart rate is starting to go up because you're hearing some of these really negative outcomes of adverse childhood experiences, that's a totally normal response to stress. Just take a breath, take a few really deep breaths, and if you need to, step away if this is too much, okay? So just want to let you know your reaction is normal if you're having that, and feel free to take a break. Next slide. So signs and symptoms of trauma. So this, again, is where you all have seen this. Feel free to type in the chat any signs or symptoms of trauma that you've seen in your clients, your staff, your colleagues, yourself. For instance, I know that with this whole COVID-19 thing lingering on, with being understaffed and absorbing the secondary trauma of folks, I'm numbing. I'm getting numb to a lot of things, which can be good. In an emergency situation, you don't want to experience all the feelings that you're feeling, so it can be okay to numb. But the problem that I'm experiencing right now is that I'm numbing to things that I used to enjoy. So photography was one thing that I used to do a lot before the pandemic really started to settle in and drag out. And now I don't enjoy it as much. And so I'm trying to figure out ways of, reducing that numbing due to all of this stress and, kind of hacking my brain and figuring out how do I get beyond that. Anger and depression. No patience. Yes. When you are having all of that toxic stress, your neural cavities just go straight to fight, flight, attack. Let's get on with it. You don't have that emotional frontal patience, empathy. It's very hard. Low production at work. That's right. That's part of the freeze response, where you're just exhausted and you feel like you can't do any more. Yep. Short fuses all around. Clients may avoid contact. That's because they are in fear. They do not feel safe when they have all of these stresses coming at them. And so they may, they're trying to avoid eye contact. They may try to avoid you altogether because they just don't feel safe. And it's not due to you. It's due to all of these stresses. So the response is to make people feel safe. That's like the mega response to addressing trauma and toxic stress. Okay, thank you all for sharing those. I appreciate it. Let's go to the next slide. So this slide and the next slide, again, are, I'm not going to be able to go through all of it, so plan to look at it later, but just wanted to share a few of the typical behaviors and symptoms and ways that we see trauma responses showing up. Emotional difficulty identifying, responding to emotions. That's my numbness that I'm feeling, the numbing there. Physical complaints, cognitive, when somebody said, low productivity, can be hard to make decisions. It can be hard to remember things because the emergency alarm system is going off in your brain, and it's actually preventing your frontal cortex, where all that problem solving and that processing and the memory happens. It's actually cutting off activity to the frontal cortex of your brain. So we have to figure out how to calm down the emergency response system in our brain so that way we can get that frontal activity going again. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. And again, these are some additional signs and symptoms of trauma sliced in a slightly different way. If somebody's re-experiencing the trauma that they've experienced before, they might have flashbacks, or they might be frequently distracted because they're trying to deal with those memories. Avoidance, remember somebody said avoiding eye contact, that fits right in this category. Negative cognitions and moods, remember when we talked about angry, short fuses, that fits right in this category. And arousal, hyperactivity. When people feel like they are being attacked all the time by this trauma and toxic stress, they're always looking for dangers, and they're always suspecting that something's going to come and get them and hurt them. And so that's another thing to keep in mind in yourself, in your colleagues, in your staff, and your clients. Again, the importance of making people feel safe. And I think that's on the next slide, actually. Oh, no. So please get this PowerPoint presentation and watch these two short videos. The first one is like 15 minutes and the second one's 5 minutes. They really explain the brain science behind what's happening in your brain. I've tried to do a little bit of it here in this very short micro presentation, but these two videos do a great job of explaining it in more detail. Now, so I always like to talk about trauma and resilience together. A lot of people just talk about trauma-informed care, but I think it's really important to talk about the flip side of the coin because, first of all, let's define trauma, or let's define resilience. The ability, capacities, and relationships to manage and overcome that diversity. Resilience is not binary. It can be built over time. And the cool thing about trauma and resilience is when you experience trauma, if you know what's happening in your brain, you can actually turn that into resilience and the ability to really manage and stand up to the traumas and the adversities that you have, as you go through life. So I think that's really a cool part of this whole field that we're in right now, is the ability to channel those traumatic experiences, get that what's called post-traumatic growth, and turn it into resilience to be able to weather additional adversities. Okay, next slide. So when we think about resilience building, there's really some families of resilience building. So the first piece is, again, that safety. It's really important to make people feel physically safe, psychologically safe, and emotionally safe. And there's different ways that you can do that. One is in your own personal space. So even just shifting your mindset to not see everything as negative, but look at the either the positives or what you can learn out of a negative experience is a resilience building strategy. Simply understanding more about how trauma and toxic stress works in your brain, and understanding how you can hack your brain and try to reduce and calm down the brain so that way that prefrontal cortex can get moving again. That's resilience building. Finding meaning in your work. Human brains are designed to want to be able to work on something meaningful for our fellow humans. That's actually the way our brains are designed to work. And if we can find meaning in our work, if we can help others find meaningful jobs, that's why it's so important to get those good fit jobs. That's resilience building. Calming down the brain, as I've said about 1 million times now, which can be done through meditation, through mindfulness, through yoga, that breathing that I talked about, going for walks outside, that forest bathing or tree bathing that I think some of us have heard about, where you go for walks in the woods and it's calming. That's a resilience building strategy. Working it out physically, exercise, yoga, dance, hard work in the garden, that is resilience building. The next family is organizational. So creating an environment for growth. This really has to do with your career centers, with your workforce development centers, with your headquarters of your workforce development system in your community. So really supporting staff, giving them the space to do those personal resilience building strategies, supporting them in that, collective problem solving around problems. So instead of just leaving it on the individual caseworker to solve problems, having people come together and talk it out and try to help each other solve problems, providing those supportive resources and policies, the calming spaces, provide that physical safety. And, you can do an organizational assessment to kind of see where your organization is on helping to support being trauma informed and resilience building. And then finally, community. That's a really big part of resilience building, because we are human beings, we're social beings. So we are wired to be in social settings and supporting each other. So the connections, that caring, whether it's your church or whether it is a walking group that you belong to, or whether it is an affinity group that you have at work, those are all resilience building strategies. Skill building, our brains like to tackle new situations. They like to problem solve. They like to learn new things. Those are resilience building strategies. So everything I'm telling you is not rocket science. I mean, I'm sure that you all are like, oh yeah, we've done that, or, I've seen the benefits of that. That's all resilience building. So it's stuff that we as individuals can do every day. We don't need to be psychologists or, social workers or anything like that. Just us being humans, we can engage in resilience building for ourselves and for our colleagues. Next slide. So let's talk about resilience. I invite you to type in the chat, what strategies are you using to maintain and build resilience, or have you seen to really help build resilience? What do you do? What have you seen? There's a little bit of a lag on the chat, and then it starts coming. Here we go. Yep, meditation, walks, dealing with emotion in the moment. Exactly, not avoiding it, but facing it. Don't be afraid and run from it. Oh, yeah, TM, transcendental meditation, so healing, wonderful. Music, yes, I forgot to mention music. Thanks, Melvin. Walks, yoga, getting into nature. Yep. Prayer. Yep. Love that. Prayer to me is, just like meditation. Yep. Therapy, exercise, sleep. Sleep is so important for your brain to be able to, your brain actually cleans out while you're sleeping. Like it is goes through a kind of a car wash. So it's really important to get the amount of sleep that you need. I need 9 hours of sleep a night, which is what I get to be sharp. Dogs. Oh yes, I've got my kitty cat right here. This is my personal mindfulness trainer. He makes sure that I brush him or feed him like every hour or something. Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody, for sharing. Keep sharing so that way your colleagues and peers can see it. Let's move on to the next slide. This is just a guide that I helped write for the National Fund on a trauma-informed approach to the workforce, an introductory guide. And it's really focused on workforce development organizations, because we just in our field don't know a lot about this. And so we wanted to write this guide, which provides some of this basic information and goes a little deeper into some of the things that we're talking about today. Next slide. Okay, so now I'm going to turn it over to Caitlin, but thank you, everyone. Keep those resilient strategies coming.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Vicki, for that great overview of trauma and resilience. And again, the slides will be available, so you can click on some of these links and dive a little deeper after this workshop. So now I'm going to transition a little bit to talk about how we've been incorporating trauma and resilience building into our work at DESC, or Detroit at Work, we're also called. So first I want to talk about why we decided to start an initiative where we're learning about trauma and resilience. So Detroit at Work, about 2 years ago, embarked on a project to implement human-centered design across our entire system. And for those of you who aren't familiar, human-centered design is a philosophy or a way of doing work, a problem-solving strategy that really focuses on customers. So really centers what our customers' needs and designing services, systems, policies, tools around those customer needs. And so that's something we embarked in about 2 years ago, and we've been really trying to implement that strategy across Detroit at Work. We really felt that this trauma-informed care, trauma and resilience work really builds on that. So it's a way to better understand our customers and work on resilience building to try to help them overcome any of the trauma they might have experienced.
Caitlin, in the chat, somebody's saying it's a little hard to hear you, so you might need to get closer to your microphone a little bit.
Okay. I'll try. Additionally, we have several new initiatives we're embarking on to really try to expand our impact on all Detroiters and make sure our residents, especially Black and Brown Detroiters, have a pathway to the middle class. And we see recognizing trauma and building resilience as a way to help prepare these Detroiters for those pathways. And then finally, we know that the recent COVID-19 pandemic has had a traumatic impact on our community. So not just our customers, but our staff, ourselves, really the full community. And we were hearing that a lot from our staff and our centers. And so we really felt now is the right time to spend more time focusing on trauma and resilience at our Detroit at Work career centers. So specifically, what have we been doing? The project we've been working on with CSW, really the overarching purpose is to provide trauma and resilience training to staff and career center organizational support to become more trauma-informed and resilience building. So what this looks like specifically, up at the top is over the course of the year, we're delivering 5 staff trainings across all of our Detroit at Work staff. So Vicki shared some information from one of the first trainings that we did, which was actually sort of an overview of trauma and resilience. The next sort of component of our work is trauma and resilience ambassadors. So we've selected kind of ambassador staff at each of our career centers to really champion this work. So they're receiving additional training, they're receiving extra resources and support to really be the go-to people at their site. Organizational self-assessment at each career center and an action plan. So we at Detroit at Work are embarking on an organizational self-assessment for each of our career centers to see sort of how we're doing in trauma-informed practices and resilience building, and trying to create action plans to build on those strategies as well. And then finally, we have a platform where we can share resources, training videos, things like that for our staff to watch later on and have access to even after we're done working with our consultants from CSW. I'm going to go through each of those a little more closely. So the 5 staff trainings are available to our 300 staff. The first one was held in June and was called Heroes at Work, Introduction to Trauma and Resilience. And we talked about many of the things Vicki just talked about, definitions of types of trauma, the ACEs survey, trauma in employment, the impact of trauma on individuals and communities, and then resilience assessment and strategies. And this is a quote from our training that the training really opened my eyes to what I need to work on individually. It taught me not to be afraid to talk about my trauma and to find healthy solutions for it. So I thought that was an awesome quote from one of our staff that participated in the training. And in the future, we plan to deliver trainings on additional resilience strategies for staff and things they can do with their customers. The impacts of racial trauma, which is really important to us in Detroit. And then additionally, we're really open to building topics and trainings around the needs of our participants and their requests. Additionally, I mentioned our trauma and resilience ambassadors. So these are folks that are really going to be a sounding board for our team as we develop trainings and other initiatives, and kind of make sure we're headed in the right direction when we put together and deliver trainings. Additionally, they'll be leading their center in organizational assessment and planning. They'll be sort of the go-to person when other staff at their center ask questions about trauma and resilience, maybe have a follow-up from a training they recently attended. And they'll also help new staff understand these concepts who maybe are joining the team after we've already gone through this process. So we're really excited about this team to really be like our go-to ambassadors. Our organizational assessment is another component of our work. And so I'm not going to talk through all of this, but essentially it's a tool that really helps, that really defines what a trauma-informed and resilience-building organization looks like. And so each of our centers are going through this assessment to gauge sort of where they are now. What strategies are they already really strong in? Which strategies have they not even thought about? And really using that assessment to create an action plan. So what do they want to improve? What are the strategies they'd like to build on? So we're just starting that process now, and organizations are just starting to complete that organizational assessment. These are the 5 categories that they go through for the organizational assessment. So organizational policy and culture, the physical environment, client policies and procedures, staff policies and procedures, hiring, training, and supervision. So those are sort of the 5 categories of the organizational assessment, and there's some examples of the specific practices below. So for example, for physical environments, the waiting rooms and program spaces all have clear sight lines to entrances and exits. So that's something that research has shown helps mitigate, makes people feel physically safe. So that's one of the strategies that we want our organizations to adopt. And then that last component is sharing organizational resources through Vera LMS. So this is our platform that we use to share recordings, videos, all kinds of stuff that our staff can access even after the trainings have passed. And so staff will have indefinite access to these resources and through this interactive platform. So what we've done to date, we've interviewed our center managers and conducted self-assessments to make sure what we were planning for the year really matched their interests and their needs and what they've previously experienced. We delivered this intro session for trauma and resilience training. In July, we held something called Superpower Hours, which is a chance for staff to talk to our facilitators and learn more about, ask additional questions after the training, kind of get advice and things like that. And then they were also able to submit prizes for practice. So these are ways that they shared they were building resilience, and we chose random winners to receive a prize for submitting those resilience strategies. We recently kicked off our ambassador program and are teeing up our trauma and resilience organizational self-assessments right now. In the future, over the course of this next year, we have additional webinars and trainings we're going to deliver over the next few months. We're going to continue meeting with and supporting our trauma and resilience ambassadors. Staff will engage in the organizational assessment once soon, and then once at the end of the year. And then we'll also facilitate some cross-center peer sharing meetings where staff from different centers can talk about what they're doing and what they're learning. We have a lot of plans to finish this work for the next year. And I think this is my last slide, and I really just want to emphasize like what Detroit at Work, why we engaged in this process, and sort of what our hope is in going through this work and this investment. So we really want our staff to be able to recognize trauma and its effects in themselves and their customers. And we think by recognizing this trauma, it will help our staff be more empathetic to some of the symptoms and behaviors in themselves and their customers. We want our organizations as a whole to become more trauma-informed and resilience building. We think this will be done through the organizational assessment, and this is really a process that they will be going through throughout the course of the year. We want staff to have resilient strategies they can use with themselves and their customers to mitigate the effects of trauma. So we want staff to really build their resilience and know how to continue building it. And then finally, we want the resources that we're learning over this next year to be available for staff for much longer than this year. So we want to build really long-term capacity to make sure our staff and our career centers are trauma-informed and resilience building. And so this is sort of our hope. We're already sort of seeing this pan out, but we hope it will continue over the rest of the program year. All right. I think that is the end of my slide. And so I'm going to actually hand it over to our last speaker, Nihal Osman, who is from one of our career centers, to kind of talk about the impact that they've seen.
Thank you, Caitlin. Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here because when Vicki and Caitlin approached me and informed me about this initiative, I was personally so excited because this is a topic I'm passionate about. Now more than any other recent times, we're faced with high levels of stress. These last couple of years have been nothing but extraordinary for all of us, I'm sure. We've been struggling to remain productive, trying to reopen, recover, and heal in an environment of uncertainty. I hear my friends talking about working from home and not having much to do, slowing down around COVID. And while this is going on, our industry has been getting busier, trying to assist those who are most in need. Some of us may have received additional funding or grants to start new initiatives or provide new, wider range of services. So our staff have been trying to keep up with all of this, to stay safe, to juggle possibly homeschooling their kids and caring for family members who've been affected by the pandemic. And on top of that, they're sometimes even trying to learn new systems, new platforms, and new ways of service delivery to adapt to the ever-evolving atmosphere of change. So most of what I'm going to be sharing today is kind of a repetition of what Vicki and Caitlin touched upon, but from the perspective of the Career Center and actually how we're seeing trauma and stress in the workplace, specifically on the Career Center level and while directly working with clients. So last year, more than any other time, I've repeatedly heard the word stress, anxiety, overwhelming, pressure, and burnout. we are kind of a tight team. So I hear the team talk about these words, and it's becoming, this language was really prevalent in the last year, and it became evident that staff were experiencing a lot of stress. And what I think is very unique about this approach and about this initiative specifically at Detroit at Work, most of the trainings that I personally been through, or our staff have been through, focused on being trauma-informed from the customer standpoint, but this one is a wholesome, all-inclusive approach of being trauma-informed with regards to customers as well as staff. So how, this is a more wholesome approach in my opinion. This is what I particularly liked about it. So it became evident that staff were experiencing a lot of stress. Some were experiencing stress more than others. So our resilience and stress related, this is what I kept thinking about. And Caitlin, can we please go to the next slide? So according to research, employee resilience is associated with decreased stress. People with low resilience are 4 times more likely to experience burnout. So it was obvious that staff needed additional support during these times. And again, this project and this initiative came at a perfect time. And I think the focus on understanding trauma and building resilience was exactly what my staff personally needed at this time. Can we go to the next slide, please? So why is it important for staff to understand trauma and resilience? And I know that Vicky and Caitlin, they shared their, they covered a lot of that, but I'm gonna share my perspective as a career center manager and the influence of trauma and stress on our organization. So it's, from my perspective, it's important for staff to understand trauma and resilience for improved staff mental and physical well-being, just the basic, to be able to provide better quality of service. The more resilient staff is and are able to bounce back after stumbling blocks or adversities, the better the kind of service and the quality of service they're going to be able to provide to their customers, and the better they would be able to even cultivate resilience in their customers. You can't pour from an empty cup. The second one is enhanced or increased self-esteem and morale. When staff understands more about trauma, when they learn about how they interact in specific situations, why do they react to this situation in this specific way, it increases their self-esteem and their morale. Enhance job satisfaction, performance, and engagement. Again, when staff are able to handle stress and work through adversities, they will be able to better perform, and it would, again, result in increased job satisfaction and engagement. There's nothing more frustrating than continuously underperforming or struggling because of the effects of trauma. Decreased stress and burnout. Again, this is again a very important one. Greater collaboration and workplace safety. And I think it's really, really important for staff to understand about trauma in order to provide a safer workplace for everyone. When they understand what everyone is going through, what their clients are going through, or what their colleagues are going through, they become more compassionate and more patient, as we were talking about. It does increase collaboration too, because if everyone is on the edge all the time and everyone is stressed out, then it does hinder collaboration, and it doesn't really, there's no room for much teamwork. Lower absenteeism and turnover. This was a big one because especially now that we're going back to providing in-person services and staff have to actually show up to work, and they're no longer able to hide their emotions or reactions or signs of trauma at home in isolation, away from their peers and colleagues. And I know that Vicky did touch upon the signs of trauma, and they may sleep, and they cannot show up to work. And
Looks like Nihal's internet's cutting out a little bit. Caitlin, are you seeing that?
Yeah, I was just trying to figure out if it was me or Nihal.
Oh, there she is.
Oh, you're back. Okay, good.
okay. Okay, I wasn't sure what happened. So, so turnover. Well, again, when staff understand about trauma and resilience and all the good effects of working on strategies, it will, you know, and I know everyone has been struggling with turnover. And again, just this initiative will help decrease turnover. So can we go to the next slide, please, Caitlin? I know that Vicky discussed this and Caitlin with the different signs of trauma. I just wanted to touch upon it a little bit from a perspective of the Career Center manager and what I personally have witnessed among our staff and clients. One of the signs of trauma that was really prevalent last year was difficulty remembering tasks or following through with goals, especially even with staff who've been known to be very accountable. Sometimes they just don't follow through with goals. Freezing when presented with an added responsibility or faced with a challenge. And I know a lot of the staff, I've been seeing a lot of freezing, lack of excitement about new initiatives that we've been waiting for a long time. But then when you try to introduce a new initiative, staff are apprehensive. They either freeze, they are overwhelmed, they are anxious about new initiatives, or sometimes they don't take action about an important matter while they know the consequences or the repercussions on the organization and on the customer, but sometimes they just freeze. I have seen a lot of freezing, and of course, at the end, we can all chat about what we've all seen individually in our organizations. Continuous escalation of customer issues has been one too. Normally, a person would be able to handle things well, but all of a sudden, we may have some customer escalations or friction, more friction than usual. Angry outbursts, high anxiety, sometimes followed by low energy. And anxiety has been a theme sometimes among staff lately. And again, in my regular check-ins with my staff, they often feel anxious because of the reasons that was shared earlier. And what was interesting this year is usually staff who have directly to provide direct services to customers are the ones who are prone to stress because they do get exposed to and they get closer to customers. But it was interesting that this year, even the staff who don't have any interactions with the customers also have been feeling anxious and are experiencing stress. The last one is difficulty making decisions. And this was crucial because in our business, we do help participants sometimes with coaching. They come to us for support. They themselves may be going through a lot of trauma or have experienced trauma in the past that is hindering, their abilities to make decisions, and they do need the support and they need some direction. So I have seen that sometimes staff have been unable to make decisions or even customers. So this was a prevalent one this year as well. Being easily distracted or restless. So these are the ones I've witnessed myself. Now that we discussed the importance of trauma and resilience and the signs, there are some things that I also hope that my staff would take away from this initiative. Caitlin, can we please go to the next slide? So of course, the main theme or the main point that I would like them to take away from this initiative is to identify the signs of trauma in themselves and in their customers. And the next one, please, Caitlin, you can list them all. Learn how to handle difficult situations with customers and possibly colleagues. I would like my staff also, because once staff understand the underlying cause of the customer reaction, which could have been normally unacceptable, they can be more patient. They're able to deal with the situation more tactfully, with compassion, while also holding their boundaries. I would like staff to feel more empowered about learning how easy it could be to practice stress management and trauma mitigation techniques. They're just the feeling that they're not stuck anymore with the feelings that they're getting or with the behaviors or reactions. There is hope for healing and growth, and they can make it happen for themselves. I would like them also to learn how to actively avoid re-traumatization. This is a very, very important one. It ties to the first 2 points. By understanding the signs of trauma and practicing the learned strategies, they can definitely avoid re-traumatization. Building resilience to better assist customers. I know that we've shared it many times throughout the conversation. Just building their own resilience so that they can assist customers and provide the support that customers need, and also cultivate resilience in customers. One important one for me was to learn that the organization supports their well-being and growth. And by organization, I mean the system-wide organization, that their experiences are valid, that their employer recognizes their struggles and invests in their well-being. And again, that would lead to employee engagement and turnover. Finally, I would like them to get access to resources, and I'm so glad that Caitlin, I know she is a master in resources and making sure that we have all the data that we need. So again, this is a very, just having resources about trauma and resilience would be very, very important, because I also want staff to have autonomy over how far they would like to take this. It could be just, one session could be enough, or maybe they want to tap into other areas that they may need support in. So again, it goes back to the hope and autonomy, and just making sure that there are options out there for them. Can we go to the next slide, please, Caitlin? So far, as Caitlin mentioned, staff have attended 2 sessions and participated in activities in between. I did receive some feedback from staff about what they've learned so far. One member shared that learning about trauma has lessened their feelings of shame about their experience. Another member indicated that they better understand their reactions in certain situations now, which turned out to be signs of trauma that they were not aware of, and they have become kinder with themselves. I did see a lot of staff previously beating themselves up over, struggling with some of the trauma signs. So this was a really, really important one for me. Another person stated that they no longer feel guilty about taking mental breaks, as they know they're supported by leadership in the team. Can we go to the final slide, please, Caitlin? And these are some testimonials from staff who participated in the initiative. One of them is saying, instead of getting stuck in a spiral of negative emotions and thoughts, then having angry outbursts at home because I was suppressing the stress all day, I now take 5-minute breaks between difficult appointments to calm myself, collect my thoughts, and regain my focus. And again, that thanks to all the strategies that they learned through this initiative. The final one was, when I used to meet my customers who discuss trauma or stressful events, I would feel anxious, depressed, and disengaged at work for days. I started identifying areas of gratitude and reminding myself of the meaning of my work. So I'm going to end with this, because I found this last sentence about meaning to be a profound one, as now more than ever, we need to keep reminding ourselves about the why and the meaning, instead of just focusing on the what and how, when we were struggling with performance outcomes and, among others, just trying to stay afloat. So with that, I'm done. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Nihal. Caitlin, I think we got to get that contact slide up because one of the main things that's been coming across in the chat is folks want to follow up with us to learn more about what we're doing, about what Detroit at Work is doing. So we'll put this up in case you need to write our emails down right away. There they are. Or you can wait to get access to the PowerPoint slides on the association website. We've got some time for questions. You can either put it in the chat or put it in the Q&A, whichever you find easily enough in your screen. Thank you for everyone for the chat conversation about the language of Black and Brown Detroiters. Appreciate that. That's definitely something for us to think about. We never know what terms are right. You know, communities of color, Black and Brown, minority, racialized minority. So I think we're all still learning, and we appreciate your graciousness with us as we learn more.
Vicki, I think we did get one question, which is, where did you get this approach from? So I can share a little bit, and then you can add to it. That we decided at Detroit at Work that we wanted to engage in this approach, and so we did a request for proposals to try to find consultants who would help us implement this. And we chose CSW because they, and Vicki in particular, has an extensive background in researching this topic specifically for workforce development agencies. And so that was really important to us that we implemented sort of this training and strategy within the context of workforce development. And CSW, yep, stands for Corporation for Skilled Workers. That's where Vicki works. So Vicki, do you want to add anything?
Just to reiterate, this topic is new to workforce development, but it has been well known in behavioral sciences and social work, in first responder, emergency responder training. So we spent, like Caitlin said, about a year pulling all the knowledge from those other fields and trying to see how it could fit with workforce development. So CSW, Corporation for Skilled Workforce, understands workforce development. So I've been working on kind of, emerging this into our workforce development language and context and, real situations. And then we also have, CSW has hired 2 social workers who are deep experts in trauma, toxic stress, and resilience, and they actually do the training sessions. So we kind of operate at a team. When we're working with workforce centers, CSW can do that type of work. And I've also started to do some trainings like you just saw about the basic concepts, but it's also really helpful to have some deep experts who can really help when you need to go a little bit deeper into the content. There's another question from Paul. Is this trauma-informed training and resilience building something that you are planning on building into your onboarding plans for newly hired staff in the future? Caitlin, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, definitely. So part of our approach with this is that we didn't want to just offer a training once and have it be over, and only the people that were able to attend can get the content. We're a very large system here in Detroit. I think I mentioned we have over 300 staff, and we're always hiring new staff and expanding. So part of our approach with this is that we'd have our website of all the trainings and resources that any new staff can access at any point. And we'd have a specific plan with our Traumainformed ambassadors who would be able to onboard any new staff with these materials and kind of explain the approach and things like that. So yes, we have built this into our plans for onboarding new staff in the future.
And there were a couple of questions earlier about whether this initiative is sort of like a package that you can just buy. Mm-hmm. It's not. We've tailored this approach for Detroit at Work based on what they wrote in the RFP, but also we spent a few weeks in May at the very beginning of the project interviewing all the career center managers like Nihal, and we also did a staff survey to understand what staff currently understand about trauma and toxic stress, what they are facing regarding trauma and toxic stress, and what other trainings they have and knowledge they have built. So then we use that information to really tailor the trainings to meet them where they're at, just like we are supposed to do with customers and clients. And then we're sort of, I mean, Caitlin, I think you know this, but sort of kind of piloting the ambassadors and the learning management system and the organizational self-assessment. All the self-assessment tool is based off of something they did in Chicago. So yeah, all of this is very much tailored to the Detroit work situation, but drawing upon the expert resources that are out there that we've drawn from other fields. And if anybody wants to talk about how we might be able to help you all with your career centers, happy to talk about that. And this is so important, as I think many of you have acknowledged and recognized in the chat. We really feel it's so important to get this out across Michigan and across the country, honestly. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you. And of course, you've got the contact information, and the slides will be available on the association's website after the conference. So that concludes our presentation today. I did place the survey link again in the chat. I would like to thank our presenters, and we appreciate everyone's time for putting this together and attending the session. I hope you had some great takeaways, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. There is an exhibitor and networking break next. So take some time after the session to video chat with the exhibitors and watch their informational videos, or you can go to the networking tab to be randomly paired with another attendee for 2 minutes to meet new people. So again, thank you all for attending. And if there are any other questions, feel free to ask them. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. As I mentioned in one of the chats, gratitude is a resilience building strategy. So we really appreciate your gratitude. And you showing gratitude actually is building your resilience. So that's kind of cool. Gratitude is like a two-sided coin.
Sally, would you mind resending the survey link? Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, James. Okay, Sally, how long do we stick around? Has everybody gone on to other sessions?
Yep, you're okay. There are a couple people still left in the session, but you guys are good to go. There's the networking and exhibits right now, and then there'll be more sessions, I believe, at 1 will be the next workshop round. So we'll have some additional general sessions in between.
Okay. Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Caitlin, Nihal, you guys were awesome. We need to take this on the road.
Well, thank you so much for all the support.
Oh my goodness. Thank you. You just made it real. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Sally, thanks for being an excellent hostess for us.
Thank you. Your presentation was awesome.
Thank you, Sally.
Thank you. Thank you. We're getting there. I wish I could have shown the brain science stuff. I just think it's so amazing. Hopefully people will watch it afterwards. Well, it looks like the chat's slowed down, so I don't see any questions in the Q&A, so.
Yeah, I think we can hop off, but
okay.
and we should schedule some sort of debrief soon.
That sounds like a great idea. I'll look at our calendars.
Great.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a good one.
Bye.
Thank you, Sally.
Bye.